All right, everyone, welcome into Cherry Picking. Today's episode is playoff season, playoff time, finally, and we get to talk about the Leafs and the Lightning playoff series we saw last season. I had to bring Gavin on, obviously, as our resident. I would say you're the biggest Leafs fan in the office, I would say. Right?
By far. Like, I'm already prepping. Like, I'm looking forward to doing this video, but also not. Like, watching the game last night, they played Tampa, and like, they look great. They've looked good. They're getting the goaltending. Joseph Woll is looking really good, but it's just like being a Leafs fan, I'm feeling like, oh man, I'm ready to get hurt again. Like, I'm getting that belief again. Like, throughout the season, I was just like, whatever, we'll see when they get to the playoffs, but it's building up. They're looking good. We'll get into it deeper, but man, am I excited.
Yeah, like the expectations, right? Like, I feel like at this point as a Leafs fan, you kind of have to keep them like at bay because like you guys have had a really solid team for the last 3 seasons, and it just comes to who you guys end up playing in the playoffs. And last year, I think that Tampa team, a really tough lineup to go against, but this year, like, I don't see it really as daunting as some people might think. You know, they still have obviously Kucherov, Vasilevsky, Stamkos, and Braden Point, but they did lose like some of their like depth guys, and especially on like defense, like they're without Zach Bogosian now. They don't have Ryan McDonough as well. You know, they have like Nick Perbix is filling in for those roles, and you know, we've watched him play all season long. He's okay, but he definitely doesn't have the experience that some of these other guys do. So I think, as the odds indicate, Toronto does have the upper hand going into this one.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think exactly like what you're saying there too. The areas Tampa got weaker, the Leafs improved, right? So like the bottom 6, like Toronto got better, Tampa got worse, losing guys like Palat. Toronto brings in guys like Lafferty, like more grit. And I think that was a huge reason why they lost that series last year. Yeah, their top guys weren't really performing. They didn't carry the series, but it's that lower depth that Tampa's always been good for. Even when they won their cup with that line of Coleman, Gaudreau, like that's always been their identity, having that bottom 6 that can just play with anyone. And now even looking at their defense, like McDonough was really the backbone of that defense. When you look at it, I saw a lot of people, I was looking through Reddit after the game last night too. And a lot of Tampa fans are saying like McDonough was like the defensive coordinator of that team. Like he was a huge piece for them. Yes, they still have Hedman. It's kind of weird to hear some analysts talk. They like act like Tampa has this unreal decor strictly just because Victor Hedman is back there. Yes, he's a Norris Trophy winner, but they really lost a step in their bottom 6 and in their 6 defensemen.
Yeah, I personally like. I think Sergachev is a great guy to have on, like, let's say your power play or, you know, just in your top 4. But I don't necessarily consider him someone who can shut down any of these superstars that the Leafs have. Like I think he's one of those guys who plays with a lot of his emotions and can get tempered really easily and take some stupid penalties. So I definitely prefer that. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up, like, I think Toronto just comes into this in terms of like recent form in much better form than Tampa Bay. Like Tampa Bay since the All-Star break has the 23rd best record in the NHL at like 13, 15, and 5. So below 500 their last 22 games of the season. And then on the road too, they've been brutal this year. 18, 22, and 1 with a negative 29 goal differential on the road. That's the worst out of any playoff team. Yeah. And then the Leafs, on the other hand, despite some of the complications they've dealt with injuries or, you know, guys coming in and out of the lineup, especially at the trade deadline, they're 18, 8, and 3 since the All-Star break. And maybe their goalie situation is a little interesting heading into it. We don't like, I don't really know what's going on with Matt Murray right now. Like, do you think he's going to play?
I don't think so. And even after seeing Joseph Woll's performance last night, like, I don't even want him to start. Even if like, I think a lot of Leafs fans like are feeling confident in this Woll kid. And if needs be, like, I think a lot of them would be confident with seeing Joseph Woll go in that, because Matt Murray has been a question mark all year. This new young homegrown product of the Leafs have been dying for years to finally get their hands on. They might actually have one now. And I think at this point, like, I probably would rather have Joseph Woll in that over Matt Murray.
Yeah, I'm definitely agree with you there. And then Samsonov, I think will obviously still be the starter. There's no really front there on his injury news, right? I saw he got hurt in that game, I remember, against Montreal kind of, but they kept him in and he's fine, right?
Yeah. Or okay. Samsonov, so nothing. The sprain, yeah, I think he's fine. He had a quote. He was like, "Sammy, don't break" or something. So you just love it. So Russian.
So Russian. That's what the Leafs have needed. This Russian goaltender who can kind of just listen to the media and does not understand any sort of criticism that he's facing and just doesn't give a shit. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. And then looking a little bit more at the odds, and we'll look at the odds at a couple of different sports books so you guys kind of get an idea of what the market's set at right now. But Gavin and I were talking right before the show, like they did open consistently at -140, the Leafs, to win this series. Of course, they have the home ice advantage. They're playing at home. Game 1 would be next week.
Mhm.
And at -140, now we're seeing them on FanDuel up to -155. If you do want to bet the Leafs, you can still get them at DraftKings at -145. We'll put that description to sign up in the link below. But I mean, I think I'm going to take this price at -145, especially considering where we've seen it move. Like, I would consider FanDuel a pretty sharp NHL book.
Yeah.
I really like that. So I think that's a good price to kind of take a chance on.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's just so hard for me being a Leafs fan. Like, it seems like I'm like I don't know the word for it, but like everything's going to go wrong. Like, things seem to be going so good. All the stars are aligning. Tampa's falling off. Everyone's talking about how Tampa's tired. They've had too many runs. The line's moving. Like, it scares me, but I do think it's a good price. Like, being negative and optimistic at the same time. Like, I do think like this is the best chance they've had at advancing through the first round. They have the depth. Looking at their lineups before, like, they really didn't have that in their bottom 6. Like, they had random plug and play guys in there. Like, they had Galchenyuk in against the Habs. Like, there's so many different pieces in there, but I think to date, this is probably the most complete Leafs team we've seen. And then going inside with Tampa kind of not being the Tampa team that was, maybe it's an end of a dynasty. I do think this is a good price.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think -1.5 too, in terms I could see them, winning in 6 games here. Look, like I always say this, the bubble has to burst at some point. And I think this is, although maybe not the ideal matchup you want to see for Toronto in terms of like, if you just look at it from like an outside scope, like, oh no, it's Tampa Bay. They've been so good in the playoffs for the last 5 years. But like, teams start to regress at some point, and we've seen Vasilevsky's been a reason why they've been so good. This year, he's been worse. That wear and tear. He's played a shit ton of hockey over the last 4 years because their backups have been like Brian Elliott and whoever else they've had the 2 seasons before that. Yeah. So I think this is the time. I think this is the series, and I don't want to get too excited for you or with you, because I know how it could feel to maybe it not happen, but you got to believe, man.
I do. That's the issue, man. I'm believing a lot. I think the only true way to win the series, though, could be in 7. I think if they're going to do it one way, I think that might be a good approach to it. Right now, it's plus 205 to just the series to end in 7. And then if you want to take the Leafs to win in 7, it's plus 400. So I think those are like decent sprinkles there, too, if you just are a bit more pessimistic like me. But I think like 6 games or like 4-2 correct score could be a good bet, too.
Yeah, I like both of those thoughts. And then just looking at some of like the more fun props that we have here, like on FanDuel and DraftKings, they both have series player props, like for who's going to have the most goals, who's going to finish the most points. Matthew's leading a lot of these categories normally, but you mentioned you kind of like Willie to lead the team or the series in goals, maybe even points. Last year we saw him. He's been a more consistent playoff performer, I think, over the last 3 years than we've seen from some of these other guys, right?
Yeah, he seems to be a guy that always elevates his game in these big moments. Willie, like personally from a Leafs fan point of view, like a lot of fans were kind of hard on him after he held out for that contract, and he's always seemed to kind of redeem himself in these playoffs. He might get off that lazy rep in regular season, but I honestly just think that's mainly to do with how easy he makes the game look. Like, he's out there, like, it doesn't look like he's trying hard because of how well he skates, but he does seem to always elevate his game in these playoff situations. And I think in terms of matchup too, like Matthews is going to have more of a shutdown role. And then it's going to be JT, maybe Nylander and O'Reilly. They're still kind of piecing around those things. But I think in terms of a matchup, and also Nylander's been getting a confident boost. He had a rough week and a half, 2 weeks, not doing too well, but with some guys sitting, Nylander's been brought back up to PP1. He's been getting elevated roles, more ice time. So I think it's kind of a perfect spot for him here to have a big first round series.
Yeah. I like everything you said there. And I agree. I find like maybe it's just his attitude that people might think he's just like lazier, but I think it's more of a testament of just how like smooth and fluid he is as a skater and with the puck as well. So I really like Nylander in this series too. And then I want to ask you about this one prop here, because it's kind of like not random guys, but maybe a little bit more depth guys. Most goals to score in the series. This is at DraftKings. Ryan O'Reilly, so new Leaf, versus Alex Killorn, who's been like a decent playoff performer over the past 3 years for sure. So the price is even. They're both at -115. If you had to pick one of them, like biases aside, who would you go with?
That's really tough because Ryan O'Reilly is historically like a very good playoff performer too. I can't. Is Killorn playing on like the top power play unit or anything, or also probably similar roles, right? Like they're both probably PP2 and like third line players.
Yeah, similar roles. I don't think I see Killorn on that first power play in the playoffs. I'd be pretty surprised with all the talent and if they're fully healthy, right? Too. I don't see that happening. But second power play as well, similar roles like that third line kind of grinder, grittier role. You might see them both kind of featured on the PK here and there as well. So I think the market's up pretty evenly. I think I would go with O'Reilly just because I don't think that Tampa's going to score a ton in this series personally. So I would roll with O'Reilly in that market.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm definitely leading O'Reilly, bias aside.
Yeah. So, but yeah, biases aside, of course. But I mean, there's not really much else to dive into with this series. I think it's both pretty clear our perspectives here. Despite, you got to leave Gav's biases aside, I think he would be making this pick regardless, just using his hockey brain and kind of what we look at to handicap NHL games. I think this is definitely the better side. We're seeing the market move in that direction as well. So we're going to be taking the Leafs. I think we'll probably, Gav said, are you going to take that prop to go to game 7?
I might sprinkle it. Like I've talked to like people in the office too about how like I almost want to bet Tampa just to like hedge my emotions a little bit, but I like can't stomach that either because I'd feel sick. That's blood money if I do that. So yeah, I think series total is a good thing to look at because in my eyes, like if they're gonna finally get out of the first round, they got to fight off all their demons and win a game 7. So I think that's a decent look at it, especially if you don't want to pay that minus 155 price and just go a bit lighter on it. I think you can get good value on not even picking a side, but just the series to go to 7 games at plus 205. And then if you like the Leafs or Tampa, I think Tampa is about 450 to win in game 7. And then the Leafs are plus 400. So I think that's a decent look.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to think to look at it as well. If you're not looking to lay down like a ton of money, play those higher odds, kind of more fun ones. Especially if you're a Leafs fan, that kind of definitely benefits you too. I'm going to be taking the Leafs and minus 1.5, I think. And then, that Ryan O'Reilly prop, I think I might just sprinkle on at DraftKings because it seems pretty fun too. So, yeah, that's it from us. You see where our heads are going. We're seeing Toronto finally make it through an NHL playoff series in 10, 15 years it would be?
2004. So
20 years.
19 years.
Bang. There we go. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in here. Gav, thanks for joining and giving us your non-biased opinions. Always appreciated.
Always.
And if you're looking to bet these games or they're looking to bet the playoffs and especially this series, we'll put the link in the description to sign up at DraftKings. They currently have the best price. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.